Ouch. In this video, I'll be showing you a Diablo 1 HD mod called Beelzebub that not only allows you to play Diablo on modern resolutions, but also adds in a bunch of extra features to give birth to what I call Diablo 1.5. And I'll explain why I say that later. But if this is your first time on my channel, good morning, afternoon, I'm Steven Nonsense and gaming and geek culture is what I do. So the Beelzebub HD mod doesn't recreate the sprites or anything, that would have been insanity, but one of the many things it does is to allow us to run the game on large modern resolutions and displays. So much so that I actually had to play the game in a lower resolution than the maximum possible because otherwise everything on the screen was just too tiny. Mind you, there's also a very handy dandy real-time zoom feature implemented so you can customize your viewing experience even in this most distant of perspectives. However, the UI elements would still be hella tiny, so I decided to run it in the somewhat smaller resolution in consideration for my already poor eyesight. After all, the game still uses the same Diablo 1 color palette, so the thing is dark, making small things that much harder to see. That in itself would have been quite fine and dandy. Being able to play the classic Diablo 1 on a 1080p monitor in full screen mode would have been simply brilliant, even if not necessarily video worthy material. But that's not where the modders called it a day. Oh no, instead they decided to fix a bunch of outstanding bugs, almost as ancient as the Primevals themselves, and also add a bunch of things to the game. Most of the things they added are imported from none other than Diablo 2. Well, maybe imported isn't the right word for it, just ported, because they do have to conform to Diablo 1's stats and mechanics. What do I mean by this? Well, the Beelzebub HD mod adds in several new classes: Barbarian, Necromancer and Assassin to the original Warrior, Rogue and Sorcerer. That would be pretty awesome, but again, they didn't stop there. These aren't some hacked in or customized versions of the original characters, they come with their own special skills and abilities taken from Diablo 2. So for instance, the Necromancer can summon undead minions, the Barbarian can rage, and the Assassin can do assassin type stuff. I do not know, however, why there is no Monk class in the game, most likely because the mod applies only to Diablo 1, not its Hellfire expansion as well. Which is a good thing, because getting a hold of Diablo nowadays is rather difficult, let alone tracking down the expansion that isn't technically necessary. The Diablo 2 additions do not end there though, not by a long shot, because this mod comes packaged with waypoints, champion monsters and minions, rare and set items, guides bumming around town, and there is also a crafting component, which for the time being I only saw it exist in the multiplayer version of the mod. So how does the game actually play? Pretty damn great. You have the option of doubling your character's speed of movement through town, which cuts down on the time you waste when making runs to replenish your potion stock and dealing with inventory items. I love it how the enemies make brief stops in between what would have been their turns. It makes them seem a bit hesitant about approaching this living, breathing human that's trading in their undead domain. Yeah, I said what would have been their turns, because at its fundamental concept, Diablo was designed to be an old-school turn-based dungeon crawler type experience. Once you're in the actual dungeon zones, things slow down quite a bit. You are still limited to walking in a general grid pattern, and receiving lots of quick hits will interrupt your attack animations, so try to avoid getting surrounded, unless that's how you intend to play. Now, a bit of a tangent. The highly specialized character classes of Diablo 2 are pretty damn cool and offer you quite a bunch of builds to fit a plethora of playstyles. However, you are limited to the abilities of your chosen class. But Diablo 1 offered a different layer of freedom that was taken out of its sequel, and which works even better when combined with the special class abilities of D2. What I'm talking about is the fact that any character can learn the same pool of spells as long as they have enough stat points invested in magic. So besides the new class abilities in Diablo 1.5 Beelzebub, you can also learn spells as an originally non-spellcasting class, like you could in Diablo 1, but couldn't in D2. To me, this is much better than the otherwise very thematic and diverse skill trees of Diablo 2, because it allows me to customize my character much closer to my exact playstyle without having to be limited by the skill trees. This means that if, for instance, I want to be a melee fighter who can use their mana to either heal themselves or do a little bit of AoE, then you can do that, and I did. My assassin has a bunch of spells to use in specific situations, usually to get me out of deadly situations or allowing me to deal with a large number of enemies on the screen. Like I said earlier, it is best to avoid being surrounded in Diablo 1. Now you might argue that I kinda described exactly the Paladin class in Diablo 2, and you'd be right. However, I'd say that from an immersion and world building perspective, it's much more interesting for all classes to have access to the same spells, since it gives the impression of a much more cohesive, more stable world, at least in my opinion. I much prefer this approach. It gives the game a much more tabletop RPG sort of feel in terms of freedom. So anyway, in case you're a Diablo 3 hater like my friend Unicom, with whom I co-host the Game Tales podcast, check the card for links, and you've played Diablo 2 enough times to have found Tal Rasha in all of its tombs at least once, then I highly suggest you get yourself the Beelzebub HD mod. Its blend of Diablo 1 gameplay and Diablo 2 features make the game a seriously fresh experience that I'm certainly you will thoroughly enjoy. You'll find a link to the mod in the video description, and I'm pretty sure you can get your hands on Diablo one way or another. Let me know in the comments about some other mods for old games that I should have my eye on for the future. Thank you for watching, be kind, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.